Welcome into episode 204. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at Bailey J Adams 22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. It's May, which means we get the college football video game teaser, like the actually not even the teaser, the actual trailer.
Oh,
That's this month.
you're absolutely correct. I had not even thought about that. That is
I hadn't
fantastic
thought
news.
about it
That's great.
until I hadn't thought about it until probably 10 minutes ago when I saw a tweet from 17 hours ago, which would have been like right as it turned to May. And somebody had quote tweeted the like, oh, full length coming in May. And someone had like, it was the gif of Kylo Ren like sticking out the lightsaber like right in Rey's face. And they were like, where is it? And so they
So
wanted
not
it at
to
midnight. But
not
yeah,
to
go ahead.
immediately derail the podcast as I've been known to
Do
do,
it.
but it was revealed this week by Matt Brown that some of the cover athlete information and
Oh
situation.
yeah.
And that what they're doing is there are going to be 4 different cover athletes because they're going to be different versions of the game, which is pretty usual for video games these days. Each of the Power 4 conferences will be represented, and each of the 4 players is a different position. So that adds some fun of trying to figure out who the players are going to be.
Yeah, I also when I said this to you when we were talking about this, I was like, it would be cooler if it wasn't 4 players like for 4 different versions, if it was just these 4 players on the cover.
I agree
Like a
with you.
four,
I agree
it
with
would
you.
look cool.
I wonder because I'm
But
also definitely going to buy it. I guess I'll have to see what the versions are. I'll probably just buy whatever the most expensive one is.
what why?
Because it probably has the coolest stuff. And
That's true.
and NCAA 14 came out literally more than 10 years ago now, and I still play that game almost every day. I think I played it 2 days ago, so like it'll be
Yeah.
worth it for me.
Well, that's the thing is like between 2014 and 2024, every year you didn't spend $60 on the NCAA video game. So now presumably you can afford to
I've
do
been
that.
saving up. I'm ready to spend like
Yeah.
$1,000 on a
Yeah.
video game.
Every year leading up to this, you haven't spent money on this game. And now this game's coming back out for the first time in forever.
I
And you
was
play it all
thinking
the time.
though
So
how the Big 12 athlete is almost certainly going to be a Colorado player. I'm certain it'll be
I'm gonna be and I'm
either
prepared for that to
Sanders or
happen,
Travis
but I'm still
Hunter.
gonna be mad.
You know what's funny though is that I wonder how much they regret that given how downhill the Colorado situation has gone in literally the last 48 hours. If you're not on social media often, wow, things that the Athletic wrote a pretty pretty wild story, and things have unraveled since then.
It should like unbiased. It should be Ollie Gordon, right?
Like just totally unbiased. I'm gonna level with you. If
Yeah.
I was at EA, I'd pick a Colorado player because I think they're like the story. If it was just like it because it's not a talent ranking, right? It's not just straight
No,
up pick
but
the most
like
talented player in each conference.
it feels like it should be more of a reward than just like, oh, pick the Colorado player who's
Are
playing for a 4
UCF
and 8 team.
fans ready for when Dylan Gabriel is one of them? Because I feel like there's a fairly notable chance of that.
We talked about this too. This is again, we weren't really planning on talking about this a lot, but we talked about this too because it's like it's so weird to think that in their first year in the Big Ten that Oregon, like an Oregon player, would be the one to represent the Big Ten on the cover of the video game.
Yeah, because that just doesn't fit. This year is going to be weird. Like we were just on this before the podcast too, but I feel like we're in the 1% of 1% of college football fans, right? Like I follow this stuff to an unhealthy degree. Probably need therapy over it. And I know I'm going to get confused multiple times this season when I see like the Cal Wake Forest game in October and are like, what the hell is going
You're like,
on
why do they
here?
schedule this non-conference game for October?
And on
And then
top
it's
of that,
UCF in Florida.
there are teams in the same conference playing non-conference games against each other. Aren't Baylor and is it Baylor in Utah or Kansas State
Oh,
and Utah are playing a non-conference game this year?
did they actually decide to do that?
Yeah, they're
I hate
doing it.
I hate
There
when
are
that
like
happens.
I think there are 4 different Big 12 teams who are doing that this year, who they're playing non-conference games with Pac-12 teams who came to Big 12. I'm going to be wildly confused for
I hate
long
when that
stretches of the
happens. So
season.
that's great. All right, let's get to talk to what we're actually here to talk about. Which is a couple of things where it's mostly portal related. We'll talk quarterbacks and one quarterback in particular in a little bit, but we'll start with more of the other positions. UCF got a few more commitments. I'm not sure if I missed any here. I don't think I did, but the first one was one that we were wondering about for a while, which was USC defensive back Traquan Fegans. And then the bigger, I think, more notable ones. Like, do we need to talk about Fegans at all? But we can, but I don't have much to say.
We covered him a ton in the previous podcast. Yeah. If you're here looking, I actually feel like most of you are probably not here specifically for Traquan Fegans content. So. I will say some of you, at the risk of looking dumb this fall, I think some of you got a little too excited about that one. I think some UCF fans just saw the Alabama and USC logos and were like, "What a get!" He's a good ad. He's depth. I'm not necessarily. He's not. When we're doing our transfer draft in a couple months, I don't believe I'm going to take him. I guess this is where I'm landed on that one.
Yeah, and it's all like it's one of those things where I think as we've gotten more into this, like you have to just learn your lessons with some of these guys that are on their third schools.
Yeah.
I don't. It's
It's
just
a
it's
low
tough
hit rate by
to.
school number. Now, unless you're Dylan Gabriel and you're star
You're just a
power all
hired
around, but
mercenary.
it's once you're on to school 3 and you didn't play a ton at the first 2 schools. I'm not saying that it means it's over for you because it absolutely doesn't. I'm just not betting the house on it, I guess is how I
Right.
describe that.
Right. Speaking of guys been at a few schools, UCF got the MAC Offensive Player of the Year from last year, Penny Boone, who ran for 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns. Um, I think when we saw this, it was like, again, we talked about this on the podcast last week. It was like, why are they going after these like starting caliber running backs? That seems a
Scary.
little weird, and it was a little scary as far as RJ Harvey, but not the case.
No. So as far as the Harvey stuff, there are rumors that another in-state school did attempt to entice Harvey with a pretty notable sum of money, but Harvey, to his credit, turned that down, which is why we love RJ Harvey, and he's a UCF Knight legend. He's going to go down as a UCF legend, right? Like he feels like he's really in that category more than anyone's been in a couple years. But
Yeah, you know what's funny about that is I thought about it and I was like, the one way I think he already is, but the one way he would really kind of like tarnish that is if he after all this time like gets this far into the spring and then transfers and people it would leave people like not saying it erases what he did, but it would leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth
I
and
agree
he
with
wouldn't
that.
be
But I
remembered
think
as the guy like that he is now.
But if that is accurate, I think that just adds to the RJ Harvey mythos as other teams can, throw money at him and he's still not walking away. But so that was where some of the concern came from. If you start seeing UCF offering high level running backs and you're like, hey, what's going on? But Penny Boone just kind of seems like really, really elite timing for UCF. So he was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year last year. He rushed for 1,400 yards. If you're wondering who else did that, RJ Harvey also rushed for 1,400 yards. He's a very different build than RJ, though. He's a lot bigger, and I was watching him some of his highlights, and he's really more of just like an impact runner who bounces off guys. And they're going to complement each other really well. And he transferred to Louisville because listen, you put up those kind of numbers in the Group of 5, and in the New World Order, you are immediately transferring to a Power 5 program, Power 4, whatever the hell, I don't care. And goes to Louisville, is there for a few months on the roster and everything, and then he transfers again. There are different internet rumors of varying levels of certainty about what that was about. There were a lot of rumors around Louisville of like NIL payments not coming through or something. I don't know if this has anything to do with that, but whatever. Louisville lost some guys. He's one of them. He moves on. He was set to go to Kentucky, but according to, I have the website here because I want to give credit. According to Sea of Blue, which is the Kentucky SB Nation site, there was a credit transferring issue or something like that, basically an academic issue that meant he couldn't enroll there. And so it really is like he should not have ended up at UCF, but it's kind of one of those happy accidents where it worked out that way. And suddenly UCF is going to have like genuinely one of the most insane running back duos in the country. I don't know how many are really out there that are going to compete with this one. I mean, if he lives up to the hype, I know he's coming from the Group of 5, but in the transfer portal era, you were just talking about how we continue to learn stuff. Guys who produce like crazy at the Group of 5 level and then move up tend to be pretty productive at that level too. So this is a unexpected get, but my God, I mean, you talk about going all in on a Big 12 run. This is part of it.
Well, when you think about like a guy who did something at a Group of 5 level and then in his first year in the Big 12, like lived up to that and did it again or even did it even better, RJ Harvey last year.
Yeah.
Like it was the same. He made the jump from year to year and had a 1,400 yard season. So
it's more like mid levels of production, you never know, or low levels. But when a guy is a straight up star, that just translates for some reason. I don't know why, but it does.
And then, like you mentioned, he's I think 6'1", like 240 is what he's listed at, or something like that. Like
I think he might be listed
somewhere
6'2".
around there.
Yeah,
6'2". And yeah, so I mean, just a completely different style of back than RJ is, and it'll be interesting to see. Like we've talked about this, at length on this podcast for as long as we've had it. I think ever since Gus has been here. He's never been like he wasn't like Heupel and like Frost was to where he would like rotate running backs that often. Like he mostly has one guy and then kind of has a guy that kind of comes in and complements him. So it'll be interesting to see how they use RJ and Penny. And it honestly, if you look at what like his workload last year, like maybe they were like, oh yeah, we talked about this. We might have talked about this last week.
We did,
but it was just like kind of lightening the load for RJ, not in terms of like, oh, like he's not going to play as much, but just like when he needs to come off the field, he can come off the field and there's not a massive drop off. So
there was an interesting story The Athletic had, which now I'm going crazy, but that The Athletic had a couple weeks ago where they were talking about the way that what schools target in the portal has changed and the way that schools build their rosters have changed. And a big one for the Georgias and Ohio States of the world is that they are obsessed with getting depth this offseason. because there's a 12-team playoff, because the season is going to be longer than ever and players already have a hard time holding up and they're just determined to have that depth because guys are not going to stay healthy. It's like even in a perfect season, guys who start get banged up. And I'm sure RJ Harvey, just like every other player, was banged up by the end of last season.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're UCF and you're saying we want to have the type of season where we're playing somewhere between 13 and 15 games, this allows you to have two really good running backs who can both have basically keep their legs fresh throughout the entire season. And that's huge. That's a game changer.
Yeah, and it is. It's just going to be interesting to see how they split because, and I don't want to read too much into this, but I guess I saw something resurface today where it was a video of Penny Boone. I don't know if it was when he was trying to go to Kentucky or what, but I guess he said something along the lines of like, oh, they're talking about second or third back, like get out of here or something like that. But like now that he's at UCF, like, yeah, he is the second back. He's not coming in to start over RJ Harvey. I would imagine he knows that.
Like I said, I think that his unique situation resulted in limited options for him. Like I think like I said, this is school number 3. This is Power 5 school number 3 that he's been attempting to work at this offseason. So I think that that's part of it too.
I saw so many people getting mad about it because like it was like Kentucky fans, like whoever was like, how can they admit him? Like about the whole things transferring. Like
I don't think Kentucky's like a good school or anything. I think just I don't even think it's about like the prestige of the school. I think different schools just have different rules about how that stuff works.
It was weird. But no, I mean, exciting. I again, going into the offseason, didn't think like, even going after the spring ball, wasn't thinking like, oh yeah, they're going to go get another 1,000-yard rusher, 1,400-yard rusher. I was like,
no,
we'll see. And now I do wonder, like, one of the other running backs is going to leave, right?
I don't know, because it's the spring. I mean, they announced this at interesting timing because the window to enter the portal ends either today or tomorrow. I think it's today. So those players have to make up their minds pretty quickly. I do think this probably signals that Miles Montgomery, who we didn't hear much about anyway, is probably going to be a bust. I could be wrong, but I don't know. You just touched on really well how Gus has never been go deep into his bag in the running back room guy. So I don't know I don't know what RB4 is going to be doing on this roster. And then you got Stacey Gage and Frankie Arthur. I'm sure they'll redshirt now, obviously, but
yeah.
Can I be a Debbie Downer about all of this?
Sure.
So you've got.
I know what you're going to say.
I wonder if you do, but we'll see.
I was going to bring this up. I think maybe
skill talent is insane for this UCF offense. I think it has I think that this straight up might be the best offense since 2017, 2018. You've got KJ at quarterback. You've got Kobe Hudson, who's a draftable receiver. Now you have a two-headed monster running back in RJ Harvey and Kobe Hudson. They just got a wide receiver 3, presumably we'll get to. You got Townsend. You got Randy Pittman. Like, you're set on offense. Except for the offensive line, which we talked about was something they had to address this spring cycle, which there's still a lot of time left to get players. But as of now, it has not been addressed. And I wanted to read you a tweet because...
Oh, okay, I was going to pull it up if you didn't have it.
We're so on the same... we didn't plan this, I swear. Because we talked about how UCF specifically feels like they need help at tackle. This is a Bud Elliott tweet. How desperate are schools for offensive tackle help in the portal? A guy can be literally dead last in the nation in PFF blocking grade, and like half of the country is interested because he has starting experience. That is a problem that UCF has a glaring need that I think it's becoming clear that we can just say at this point they're not going to be able to address before the start of the season. It's just going to be an issue.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, it's not what you want. I wish we could copy and paste last year's offensive line with this year's skill talent. That would be great.
Which, two things. One, doesn't this make you like this is how college football used to be, right? Like, it'd be like May, and we're just like, yeah, they don't have a good offensive line. Nothing can be done about it. Oh, well, like, it's like back to that. But I don't want to like come across as this is a disaster and the O-line's going to be terrible. They are returning good pieces from last year. Amari Kite is back. Marcellus Marshall is back. Yeah. Adrian Medley is back. Caden Kittler is back. I think that unit has the potential to be the weak point on the offense. And I don't know if there's a unit you want less to be the weak point on your offense than the line. So I could be wrong. Maybe guys emerge, but it feels like they're going to, starting out before injuries and wear and tear and everything, probably be one guy down from being a truly strong unit. And that's a scary place to be in.
And I've heard it said a lot that like your offensive line is only as strong as your weakest link. And that's not really what you want. Like, when you're UCF, if you're a guy away from having a really solid offensive line, like, then it might be, that's the problem. And
which does having insane skill talent cover up some of that? Like, sure, a little bit, but the offensive line is what allows the skill talent to be the best version of itself. And if you don't have that part of it, there's a cap,
Yeah, and the other thing that you can kind of work around it is if you're going to, scheme, it's a lot about scheme and about if you can kind of overcompensate and kind of cover up your offensive line issues by calling the right plays and getting guys open quickly and getting the ball out quickly. And we'll see if that's something that they're going to do. But Yeah, I mean, it's not the best feeling to like not know if your offensive line is going to be able to let you take full advantage of all of these great players that you have. But yeah, again, it's like, what can they really do when the transfer portal? It's like it's one. I think it's proven to be probably the hardest.
It
Well,
has.
it's funny because it has, but also UCF has like been able to do it surprisingly the last couple of
But
years, where like they've brought in guys that have actually worked out for the most part.
that set up a false that set up false
Yeah.
expectations for fans because that is not, we've talked about in this podcast how impressive that's been because that has not even close to been the norm nationally. There are just not a lot of high caliber offensive linemen who go in the portal. And I think that's a credit to Herb Hand that they've
Mhm.
attracted a lot of that talent here, and those guys have turned into not just starters but strong starters. But I just don't think they have the pieces this year like they did last year. And we could be totally wrong and things could be fine, but it's not even so much that I'm predicting disaster. It's just that, man, if they had last year's O-line, I'd be talking about like I don't think anyone can stop this offense. And
Yeah.
instead we have to talk about the O-line.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Last piece here on this part that we'll talk about is the wide receiver you just mentioned, Jacoby Jones,
Yep.
who is 6'3", 230, out of Ohio. Last two seasons combined, he had 53 catches for 923 yards and 6 touchdowns.
I have to add the
Yeah,
context there that 45 catches for 777 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2022. He had a season-ending injury early into this year, so his
mm,
stats are dropped. But he at his peak is a, you know, it's the Mac. The UCF's all about the Maction this week, bringing in a lot of Mac guys. But I'm feeling good about wide receiver now. I feel like he's the missing piece.
I am, but I'm a little worried because
Expound.
we did this last offseason
With who?
with like three wide receivers that they brought in, including
Critical
Corey Gamage,
difference.
who
Every single
what?
one of those guys, none of them were contributors at their previous school, except for Corey Gamage, who was actually in a very similar situation. But I'm
That's the
willing to bet
one.
that was just the core. We still don't like. I don't know. I don't think that was an unusual situation. I don't.
He's still around.
Corey Gamage, no,
Yeah.
he was out of
Oh.
eligibility anyway.
Oh, was he?
Um,
Which wasn't there
I
one of the receivers that? Oh, it was Chauncey Magwood that was still around that I did not think was still
Chauncey
here.
Magwood basically like quit's a strong word. I'm not like one of the, he quit on his team or anything like that, but he did make the decision to redshirt during last season. And that's always what you
Mhm.
do when you want to preserve eligibility to transfer. And they just didn't transfer. So I don't know. And he's still at the team, and he's a guy who, we were hearing about in spring, maybe not light it up, but is an
He might
option.
be like wide receiver 4 or 5 at this point. Like,
I mean, yeah, like I said, but I don't know. I like Jacoby Jones a lot. I think this was an awesome ad, and what a great name. So I don't know. I'm not.
also,
It addressed the need in my opinion.
this is like the third Jacoby Jones in my lifetime
Yeah,
that has
right.
like meant something to me. Like LSU baseball had a Jacoby Jones, I don't know, at some point when I was a kid, and then there was a Jacoby Jones who played for the Ravens, I believe, and then here's another one, and he plays for UCF now. But the other thing is like his body type, I feel like is not what they have in that room, which also might help. Like I
Mm.
think he's a bigger receiver than they have, definitely bigger than Xavier. I feel like Kobe is like deceptively. I feel like he's bigger than I think.
He's bigger than people think because he's fast.
Yeah.
But I will say we had this conversation like 4 or 5 pods ago, so I don't want to repeat it. But we also talked about how when looking at past UCF teams, you don't need three great wide receivers to have a really good offense. So I think that just adding another piece in there who I think that maybe I'm way too high on him. I might need to dial it back because I'm just like, great, they found wide receiver three, he's gonna crush it. That could be way off base, but it's another option you feel good about. And I think that the spring window is always, I guess that's part of why I'm impressed by it. If you don't follow college football super closely, the spring window is not nearly as fruitful as the fall window. The fall window is when you get guys who are, have a lot of talent, who are either looking to move up or find a new home, get new money, get a new situation, whatever. The spring window is a lot more guys who are maybe not are realizing where they are in the depth chart following spring camp and are like, I need to go somewhere else where I can play. So
Hmm.
the quality is much lower. And that's why when you see UCF adding guys who aren't like that, adding guys who were incredible at their past stops, it gets you excited, even though you aren't certain it's going to translate.
Because you see some of the talk on a national level too. Like I've seen people being like, "Look at what UCF is doing," and like
UCF's been, man, we were just
I
talking about
sent you
all that.
I sent you that tweet earlier where the guy was like, "I think it's time to remove Dark Horse from UCF being Big 12 contender."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Which
like
again, I have to do my spiel on this. There are literally 7 Big 12 programs, all of whom believe this is the year we're winning the Big 12. So that means a lot of those teams are going to have really not the type of season they think they're going to. So keep that in mind as
part of
well.
part of it is all of this stuff, and part of it is the fact that it's May, and I'm just kind of itching for college football to get here. But it's like I'm unfortunately starting to find myself dreaming.
Yeah, I am too. Okay, so this is what's toxic is let me walk you through a thought process I had recently. Is I realized this week that not only do I think them winning or not winning the Big 12, not only do I think them getting to the Big 12 title game is on the table, I've realized that I believe that is my expectation. And that's not a good spot to be in. But I realized that in my brain, whenever I think of the 2024 season, in my head, it just kind of ends in Arlington. And that is such a toxic spot to be in because reality is not backing that one up. But I
Yeah.
think it's just when UCF is so overt about that being their goal, and they're doing a lot of things through the portal and everywhere else to back that up. It's hard to not, believe it's possible.
Well,
I
because
absolutely think they built a roster that can do it.
it's what the offseason is for too. Like we talk about all this stuff, and it's like at the very core of it, it's like you want to believe that the goal, like their biggest goal and like the goal that they set out to accomplish is going to happen. Because like this is the offseason, it's that time to see like, yeah, maybe it does happen. It could happen.
Yeah.
And so that's where like we're in the in between months now where I'm like, what if they do? And then that's not.
We're also going to
It's
get
not.
to dream pretty deep into the season just because of they open with two, fake opponents, and that sounds so mean. That was a terrible way to phrase that. They open with an
You did
FCS
that
opponent in
before, I
Sam
think.
Houston.
I think one of the recent seasons. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. I think you called somebody a fake school or a
I
fake
need to
program.
stop because that's jokes aside, genuinely disrespectful, and I don't feel that way at all. It's just in the context of UCF schedule, I just always skip over those two games because they're bye games essentially.
It's
But
especially weird for this year because they're two back to back. It's like usually they had like last year they
yeah,
had Boise State in between. Who did they open the season with last year?
oh my God, who was the first? Kent State. Kent
Kent
State.
State. That's right. Kent State and Villanova, but they had Boise State in between it.
How do
And
you
then I
think
think
I got to Kent State in my brain?
I don't know, blue and yellow is what I thought of. I was thinking of Akron.
I thought, okay, they wore gold helmets with Nitro
Mm,
jerseys in the first game. Who was that against? Right, that was against Kent State
that
because the
makes
world
sense.
runs on uniforms. But
Um,
part of it too to me is that there's FCS opponent New Hampshire, and then there's Conference USA opponent Sam Houston, who up until last year was also an FCS opponent. I think most fans probably still viewed him that way. So it would be like opening of two FCS teams. It's just very odd, and but like we're gonna get to dream on this pretty deep, a few weeks into the season here because then if they beat TCU, it's gonna be crazy. Even though TCU's in no way, then they're gonna beat Colorado, who was gonna be a dumpster fire this year, but it's still gonna feel huge because it's
you know,
Colorado, and suddenly everyone's going crazy.
on that point, before we'll talk about Ja'Cory Brown in a second, but when you look at the schedule, like you were just saying, if they beat TCU and they beat Colorado, they're 4-0.
Yeah.
I know how, and we'll talk about this in a future podcast, how important that Florida game is.
Yes.
But in the context of the Big 12 title race,
It means nothing.
doesn't matter. So you'll get that week also of like, all right, yeah, this game matters for all these other reasons, but like even if they do lose, which would suck, they're still like they get Cincinnati out of that. And then you're thinking like they should beat Cincinnati at home, right? And then
Yeah.
you're like halfway through the season, it's like UCF's in in contention. And
We
I
need to
mean there's
stop.
gonna be
We need to stop.
UCF and seven other teams are in contention at 3-0. So
I
that's what
will
it's gonna be.
say, regardless of what happens this season, it is a testament to this staff and a testament to UCF as a program that four teams joined the Big 12 last season from the group of five. And only one of them's talking about winning the Big 12 this year. Cincinnati's talking about when can we fire this guy. Houston's talking about, I wonder how the first year of the Willie Fritz era will go. Hopefully we show improvement. BYU's like, we really ought to make a bowl this year. And UCF's like, we should win the Big 12. Like they're the only one of the new four who has even come close to ramping up as quickly as UCF has. So that's a testament to the kingdom, to the staff, to everybody. And whatever goes on to happen, that's the fact that they've ramped up and they've been committed to investing this much. That's a win. So I'll take that for now.
I have something I want to say, but I don't think
Go
I'm gonna
ahead.
say it.
Drop
No,
it.
because you got mad at me the last time I said this, so I don't know if I want to do it.
Oh, was it on the podcast?
Yes, I think it
Go
was.
ahead. Go ahead.
And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but they like UCF has been moving like a team and like a program that's going to challenge for the Big 12 championship. And that's great. And I'm enjoying all these big pickups. At some point, it has to translate to the field.
I agree. I got
And
mad at you for
yeah,
saying that.
I said something about I'm tired of just like the most fun part being the off season, like basically winning the off season and not winning in the fall. And or something the way I phrased it, you're like, okay, like let's not do that. And I was like, well, I'm dead serious. And might have been like, I don't know when it was. Might have been during the season or something. But that's
Listen,
just like
if they end up like 7-5 this season, it's gonna be we're gonna have to have a very bad conversation. I mean,
yeah,
they and what I've said on past podcasts too is that the downside to this is that if they hadn't hyped things up the way they did, And partially they hadn't got some of these players, so it's kind of a, it's a fake situation. But it, like, if you're just looking at, if someone 20 years from now is just like looking at how UCF did, like, oh, how was UCF when they first got into the power conferences? I know they went 6-6 year one, 8-4 year two, nice improvement. 8-4 is not acceptable this year. Like that's where we're at. I think that's fair to say. I don't think any of the fan base would accept 8-4.
And that's where I think some people were mad last year, is that Gus was talking about, like, oh, we actually have Power 5 depth, which I think maybe ended up just being a line because they did not have Power 5 depth.
They didn't even sort of
And
have Power 5 depth. No, they did not.
I don't know if it was, maybe he truly believed it, that they were last year ready to compete. But
it's way scarier if they truly believed it. If it's hype, it's fine. If they saw that roster and said, this is a 10-win Big 12 team, then I have larger concerns about the future.
Yeah. Speaking of the future, quarterback.
Yeah, great transition.
We talked about this last week because it was a possibility and then became reality. Former Miami quarterback Ja'Cory Brown committed to UCF. He has, I believe, 3 years of eligibility. I almost feel like he's immediately quarterback 2.
I think that's fair to say. I don't think he'd come in for anything less than that.
Yeah. So we can talk about this in the context of like Ja'Cory Brown, the quarterback, and then also what it does for the rest of the room. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's do
we kind of in hand in hand, I guess, really.
Yeah, it's always like, do we want to go positive first and then negative after, or the other way around? I can never tell what you guys want.
Part of it depends on not just you, but like who they believe he is.
This segment of this podcast has the highest potential to get thrown back in our faces 2 years from now than anything we've talked about, because I think there is a reality where he's the KJ successor and he could end up being good. And then we'll be the idiots who did a podcast about how we're not certain about whether they should have brought him in. So like, I'm aware of the risk.
That's not necessarily what I'm going to say. You don't know I'm going to say that.
Yeah, but we talked about this in text a lot, so I feel like I know,
but I've come around.
Really? Okay, well then why don't you go ahead and then I'll explain why you're wrong after.
And well, it's more of what we talked about last week, where it was like maybe they just see something in him, and that's like they're just, let's get him in the room, let's have competition. And this is probably a bad thing because I'm the one that sits here and is like, Gus Malzahn needs to break the mold of what his quarterback is, because he's just insane and he can't have anything unless it's his way, because that's how you drive off Mikey Keene. Bet you didn't think I was going to mention Mikey Keene in this podcast.
I was going to anyway, so it was happening one way or the other.
But it's one of those things where it's like and if it's going to be that way where you need this quarterback to fit this certain mold, this is the kind of guy that Gus looks for. And 6'4", 230 is a big-bodied quarterback. He's a mobile quarterback. And I don't know. It's not one of those things where I'm like, I'm certain he's going to be KJ's successor and this is going to work out great. And it's more so like he's essentially on even footing with most of the rest of the room now. And yeah, he's probably QB2 for this year just because he's the only one who's played in games, and several games. But then you go into next year and it's like, all right, you have 3 quarterbacks competing to be QB1. Like I don't necessarily know if I see the downside. I know one of them might transfer out, but at that point it's like, okay, like you're going to do that every offseason anyway, probably. Like one player is going to transfer out of your quarterback room probably each offseason.
So yeah, I don't really disagree with you that much, so I don't really have to go off here. But I want to clarify that I'm not anti bringing in Ja'Cory Brown by any means. I'm just more uncertain of the strategy behind it. I'm just kind of a little more in the 50-50 realm than all in on it, like some of the fan base is. And part of it for me is, UCF keeps things pretty locked down, but we hear stuff out of spring ball. And I'd understand this a little more if what had gotten out and what had been reported a little bit and what, had been heard out there was that, oh, wow, there's nothing behind KJ, like garbage room. What had been heard was that Dylan Risk had a pretty strong spring, and not like a strong spring, like, KJ's in trouble or anything. I just, for someone, for a player of his age, he's showing progress. And to me, it more represented, it just was shades of Mikey and JRP to me again, of Gus going, well, sure, he's looking good, but he's not the type of quarterback I want. So we just can't even explore that as a possibility. And I think that this is going to be year 4 for Gus Malzahn, and it's going to be 4 straight years of just really not even attempts to develop a homegrown quarterback. It's just going to be always going through the portal. And I understand that's becoming more acceptable as a strategy, and some of the bigger time programs are doing that. And maybe recruiting quarterbacks after high school and developing them is just going to fall by the wayside in the portal era. I don't know, but it just feels like they're they're very, very quick to bail on guys they bring out of high school. And I'd understand it more if those guys were struggling more. But and risk is whatever. I don't know if a lot of the fans really ever expected him to be the future anyway. I'm more interested in what this means for EJ Colson, who UCF themselves is kind of hyped up as their long-term savior, and Gus and all them are obviously very high on, and the fan base is very high on and clearly loves UCF. He's young. He's not even on campus yet, and he reclassified by a year. But still, what does he think when UCF brings in a quarterback that has 3 years of eligibility and has a good shot at? I mean, I don't know. It's if you're EJ Colson, what? Sage Curry Brown ends up the starter in 25. That means he's probably the starter for 26 as well. And then for EJ Colson, you're saying, what? I'm not going to start until I've been in school for 4 years.
If Sage Curry is the starter next year, he wins the job.
Yeah,
he's going to have to play well enough for them to not have a competition the next year. Like, I don't think it can be like because he starts in 2025, it's gonna be 2026 before.
I think so. What if he's good in 2025? They're not going to.
If he's good.
But I'm saying, but if I'm not saying EJ's transferring tomorrow. I'm just saying that, and like I said, it's all a moot point, because if Curry is good, then I guess it doesn't really matter what EJ Colson does. It's more, to me, just I'd like to see long-term a little more emphasis on the high school quarterbacks. And I don't even know where I'm going with this, because I could be completely wrong. And I'm fully acknowledging that this could be as simple as they were not looking to add a quarterback, but Ja'Cory Brown is someone that Gus had recruited in the past, that he likes a lot, that he's high on, and says, hey, if we can get him, let's get him. It could be as simple as that. And this whole conversation is moot.
Yeah. It makes you, I don't know, it almost makes me wish, and we talked about this at the time, how it means you don't have to recruit him for another year, but it makes me wish that EJ hadn't reclassified, just because.
Yeah, it would be a lot more
when you look at it, he comes in this year, he's going to redshirt. That's going to happen.
Of course,
he'll redshirt, and then he'll be a redshirt freshman in Ja'Cory's second remaining year of eligibility, and he'll be a redshirt sophomore in that third year. And presumably, I would think by that third year, he would be Ja'Cory's backup. So he'd be QB2 if he's okay with sticking around. You are right. I mean, it would be a redshirt junior year before he would be presumably the starter.
I'm telling you right now, this is not 1992. There is no situation in modern college football where you're going to see a redshirt junior taking his first starting snaps as a quarterback. It's just not going to ever happen again.
But also, I think the whole thing, and part of this is, and this was going back to the Dylan Risk stuff, and how it kind of like the Mikey Keene situation is, I think, I'm not saying like I'm okay with that, but I think when I was explaining my stance on it, was like operating under the belief and just the acknowledgement that, like, yeah, Gus is just going to be that way. Like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, Dylan Risk was never a Gus style quarterback, so like I never really thought he would be a starter someday. And it does feel like, oh yeah, like he's had a really good spring, he's going to be QB2. It was like when Mikey got here, it's like, oh, he's had a really good spring as a true freshman, he's going to be QB2. And then he ended up having to start that whole year, and that was not an ideal situation for Gus, obviously. But it does feel like that with Dylan, and I just kind of, I wonder about whether he transfers out or whether he just decides, because I remember him being early on in the whole process of all this, saying how much UCF was his dream school and he wanted to go to UCF.
Yeah.
How much does that still count when, like, I would assume he wants to play, so it kind of gets difficult with that. It's like, does he want to leave UCF because he wants to play, or does he just think like, I'll keep competing and I'll keep doing what I can? But I don't know.
Dylan Risk has been on campus for a year. He's been on campus for a year. And in that span, UCF has signed 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I think you just read the writing on the wall at that point. Like,
unless he just decides, I like it here.
And I don't think he's transferring tomorrow. I don't think any of them are going to transfer before the end of this coming season. But they have 5 scholarship quarterbacks. You don't carry 5 scholarship quarterbacks. That'll be for this season, and that'll be it.
And the other thing I was going to say is, like, and I think this is probably just goes back to more of it just being their strategy, is I think this was the case last year, and this is going to be the case this year, and I think it's just going to be the case forever with Gus, at least, is like every year they're going to, and probably because of the portal, and I think what they think that the advantages they have as UCF and in the portal and all that, is that every year they're going to feel like they can kind of just reload and contend. And I don't know if
we just had the whole talk about that, is that you're not going to find the perfect quarterback every year. And I don't know if that's what they're doing. I don't know. It's weird. You look at schools, Oregon, that's their new strategy. They have more money than anyone, and they're like, we'll just wait and get the best quarterback. They got Bo Nix, that worked out, then they went and got Dylan Gabriel, and that's just kind of what they do now. So but of course the difference being Oregon has more money than almost any program, and UCF has more money than some programs, but not too many. So I don't know. I guess I'm still like everyone to some degree because of how much college football has changed. these last few years. I'm just still wrapping my head around the idea that I could go in a time machine and go to 2034. Let's go 10 years in the future. And there's a real chance that UCF in that span has not started a quarterback that they recruit out of high school ever. Like, I think that's perfectly on the table.
It's weird because I was going to say something just now and I realized it's not going to work out that way probably, but it just has to line up. Like, I feel like with this philosophy they have, it's just going to have to line up one year where it's like, yeah, they want to go get a quarterback from the portal, but maybe they can't get one, or they just isn't really a good portal class that year. And it's like, okay, well, now we have an opening at quarterback, and this is finally the time to try out and see if, I don't know. I was going to say EJ, but it's like, yeah, if Ja'Cory Brown is what they hope he is, which is a guy with 3 years of eligibility left, they hope he'll be probably a 2-year starter after KJ leaves. Then yeah, you are probably almost signaling to EJ like you might not, have a future here.
But on the flip side, if you're the staff, you always have to get the best option, right? Like, you can't ever.
Yeah, they can't worry about that.
Yeah, you have to just say if there's a quarterback in the portal. By the way, I just want to say really quickly to our YouTube listeners, I'm still working on how I'm doing the podcast up in my apartment. My face has grown very dark, and I apologize about that. Yours still looks better than mine. I look like I'm in like a dramatic movie scene. Like, half my face is bathed in shadow, and I apologize for that. We're working on it. It's gonna get better. I'm sorry. I apologize. I feel bad. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, that's why I'm not even totally sure how I feel about this. Like, I'm definitely not in the camp of, oh, they shouldn't have done this. I don't think anyone's in that camp. I'm just more curious what it means for their philosophy going forward.
And honestly, part of it is like, I'm still in wait and see mode because I don't know enough about him. I haven't seen him play enough to even know if this is even something you're going to have to worry about.
Can I give you my nightmare scenario?
Sure.
Okay. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Ja'Cory Brown ends up being he's fine. He can start, but he's not amazing. Dylan Risk is a pretty solid, reliable option, but Gus Malzahn just can't get himself to start the non-mobile quarterback over the mobile quarterback. And we end up with a cursed 2025 season where Dylan Risk sits on the bench while an up and down Ja'Cory Brown, that rhymes, takes them through a rough year. Stop me if you've heard that before. But I don't know if that's even possible, but
here's my response to that is I almost feel like, I don't know. I feel like they'll go into 2025. Ja'Cory will start and EJ will be QB2. And then it's more so like if Ja'Cory's fine and like not really cutting it, then Gus does have his own recruit, his own quarterback who is his own style to be like, all right, well, no, let's see what he has. And I think he'll be quicker to go to EJ than he would be to go to Dylan.
I don't know. I actually don't know, because is this the worst time or best time to be a college quarterback? Because you could argue that in the old days, as by the old days, I mean like 2019, you sign with a school and you're just at the mercy of that school. They pick you as their starter or they don't. You really don't have transferring was really not a thing. Quarterback was the only position that did it all. You still have to sit out a year. It's luck of the draw. Now in this era, you have movement. You can bounce around and keep trying to find a school as much as you want that you can stick at and start at, but also teams are much quicker to recruit over you and much quicker to not give you that shot in the first place. Like, I don't know.
I guess it's like better, but it's also probably the same. Like, I don't know. It's better in some ways, but not in others.
It's the same but different. Is that how you?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, and this is not even true. I was going to say it's the same number of, Division I quarterback jobs available, which is not true because teams have popped up to Division I in recent years. So there are actually more available.
10 years ago, because 10 years ago there were, I think, 126 FBS schools, and there are going to be 134 this season. So, but I don't know.
I think that's what I ended up kind of coming down to the decision of like, we'll see. Like, he's an experienced enough backup for this year behind KJ. He's at least played games. And then going into next year, I guess they don't have to recruit another portal quarterback. They probably will.
Watch them anyway. They might. Probably will. I mean, they probably will, yeah.
But they don't have to. And they can run into 2025 with Ja'Cory, EJ, and then, Dylan Risk is also in the competition, guys. He's not going to really be in it because Gus. But that's probably what they'll do, right?
Yeah.
Like that feels like they'll go in. And then, I don't know. It depends. I hope EJ beats out Ja'Cory next year. That'd be great. But I just hope
I don't think that EJ is going to be like 18 next year. I just don't.
But
I don't see that happening.
I hope one of them's good. That's really all I care about at this point. It's like, just if UCF has a good quarterback, I'll be okay. Like, with their strategy, however they get there, even if they have to hurt some feelings, which they probably will. It's just that's what recruiting is these days. It's probably always been that way. But even if like it just however they get there, well, I don't want to say however. I guess I don't want them to do illegal things. As long as they can get there in a reasonable way, I just want them to have a good quarterback. So
I think part of
I
what
can
bothers
disagree
me
with the strategy, but it might happen. Whatever.
is and maybe I'm making up the past in my head, but I can't remember the last UCF season. Well, yeah, I can because it would have been 2020. But I mean that it's been a long time since we're midway through one season, and I can confidently say I know who the starting quarterback is for next season.
Yeah.
Long time. And I guess I just have to, and that's not even really a UCF thing. That's because any player can transfer at any time. I think I just have to get out of that headspace because I think that era is just done for everybody. That's the biggest thing that I'm adjusting to with college football is just that it always used to be about building, like, I'm not trying to go on an old man rant because I'm perfectly fine for college football. Like, I love it, but
it's so year to year.
It's so year. It used to be about building in these 4 to 5 year eras of this recruiting class is going to take you through this 3-year stretch, or you're going to build to this, and it is completely year to year. I can't tell you anything about what the 2025 season is going to be right now. I can't tell you who's going to start a single position. We just don't know. It's always going to be a reset every offseason, which is good and bad.
That's what I was kind of getting at earlier, and I wasn't even. I guess I probably painted it more of like, oh, if this is going to be UCF strategy. I think most program strategies are just going to be like, yeah, year to year, like. If they're bad in 2024, they're going to do everything they can in the portal to be better in 2025. Like that's every program is going to go year to year like that. I feel like it's going to be very difficult to build long term. Not even like even if you want to, it's going to be probably really hard because it's hard to manage a roster that way.
But it's good and bad. It's bad because you're right. The old school notion of like, oh, this coach came in and built something and it's going to last for whatever is gone. But at the same time, UCF could end up in a disaster where they go 3-9 or something and they have to fire a coach, and then they can win 10 games the next year because a new coach can come in and with the right resources and right recruiting pitch, fill out a whole new roster. And I mean, look at USC. USC went 4-8 and was a dumpster fire, and they hired Lincoln Riley and they went 11-2 the next year, right? 11-3, 11-3 the next year because he just turned over the roster. It's like that. So it's almost like it provides more engagement because I think the days are done of a Kansas, right? Or like a Colorado. Well, Colorado's kind of doing their own thing, but of these schools that just stay down for 10 years, I think those eras are probably over, and that's good. But also I think teams staying up for 15 years is probably over too.
Which I think is probably good, I guess. I don't know.
As long as it's not UCF, it's great. UCF should be good every season.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully that's the case. Anything else on this?
I think we covered it. It was very philosophical. I like when we get philosophical.
After all this, watch. I mean, Jacuri will be the backup this year, and then he'll transfer out in the fall.
Jacuri decommits tomorrow.
I mean, who knows these days?
Can I really quickly before football news? Huge thing for fans to keep in mind that you all keep forgetting. All of these guys have committed. Any of them at any point over the next couple weeks could be like, actually no. So just keep that in mind.
We call that the Antonio Greer.
We do call that the Antonio Greer. We also call it the Chris Mole.
Oh man. 2 linebackers. Could have been so much better last year. Let's get to the football news. Why don't we? NFL draft stuff. We saw Javon Baker go a little later than I kind of expect him to. He went in the 4th round, 110th overall to the Patriots, who I mentioned on this podcast last week as the team he had been mocked to the most in the month leading up to the draft. So
we predicted
4th round, which was
the Pegasus podcast.
The same round Gabe Davis, I think, right? Yep. Yeah. And he went to the AFC East.
Javon Baker then declared that he makes people in wheelchairs stand up because that's how exciting he plays. I love Javon. What an introduction. I will say that quote went very viral on social media and everywhere, and I have to give a big shout out to Bleacher Report who posted the tweet with a photo of him at Alabama. So that was great.
Of course. It was funny because I was just laughing at he said something else. He was like he jumped on I think Instagram Live right after he got drafted
and said a lot of things in a very short amount of time.
He was like, they waited too long. I don't know if he said they waited too long. I don't know if he's talking about the Patriots or just the league in general.
I think he was referring to the NFL as a collective entity that he's now going to have to punish.
Y'all are going to pay, like meaning the rest of the league. And then I think he said, "Where the alcohol at?"
Yeah, he did say that at one point too, or something like that. Yeah.
And so we were just laughing at that. We were in the Bucks media room at the facility on Saturday. And then the popcorn quote came out, and then I don't know. I think I was back on like our live stream or whatever, and then one of our guys, Josh, he went to USF, and obviously there's the rivalry there, but he became like a fan of Javon Baker throughout the pre-draft process because he studies tape and whatever is watching Javon's tape, and he's like, I would not mind the Bucks drafting him. But then all this stuff's going on. He tweeted like, I hope they never pry Javon Baker's phone out of his hands because he's just this was a good year for entertaining wide receivers. Because you see all the Keon Coleman stuff. And
Yeah,
like,
it's been fun.
And yeah, it's been a lot of fun the last few days of like
the enemy speaks kindly and holds a knife. That quote has never been more true.
So he goes to the Patriots where he'll catch passes from Drake May, the North Carolina quarterback who went 3rd overall. And then another UCF player was drafted to the AFC East. This one was Tylen Grable, the 6th round, 204th overall to the Bills. It is very exciting. I think I told the story on the podcast from the Combine, but I got to talk to Tylen Combine. Just, I don't know, I already liked him just from his time at UCF, but also he was just very nice. And it was basically just a one-on-one with me and him by that point. And he kind of gave me a hug after we talked. Like I was just like, hey,
how does
like,
someone kind of give you a hug?
Because it was like I guess he kind of did. It was like I think I dapped him up and like he brought me in for a hug, or more of like just like kind of and I wasn't expecting it at all, but I was like, nice guy. So yeah, UCF had 2 players drafted, and then
they had 4 players drafted.
Oh, that's true. I do honestly. I don't know. We don't need to get into it, but it does bother me that's a thing now.
So we don't have to get into it because I apologize to the
now you're in
viewers.
The sun.
The sun's setting and it's all over my face. I'm so sorry. It's been hard since I moved here.
Doing the podcast outside.
I don't need to like get into the logistics of my new home, but I can only do it in one room because it's the only room with carpet, and I sound horribly echoey if I do it in any other room. And this room just does not have a space where I can set up well. I look like Rudolph. It's like right on my nose. I'll just lean back like this. Yeah, so Matt Lee and Tatum Bethune obviously were both drafted and former UCF Knights, which the other thing for me about that too is it's not even like they really developed elsewhere. They were both very good, complete.
They were draftable players.
Yeah.
Especially Matt Lee. I mean, he was one of the best centers in the country before he transferred. And then
there were a lot of built by UCF tweets on Twitter right after he got drafted.
And you could argue like with Tatum, like he might not have gotten drafted out of UCF and that he did benefit from going to Florida State, and sure.
Yeah.
But the Matt Lee one is like he was a ready-made prospect when he got to Miami, but
which also hey, someone's career and livelihood is more than an angry podcaster's take. So like congrats to Matt Lee. That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
UCF Twitter actually handled it more maturely than I was anticipating. So that's something.
Would not have expected that. Some undrafted free agents from UCF. Jason Johnson signed with the Cowboys, as did Alec Holler. Tremont Morris Brash went to the Chargers. John Rice Plumlee signed with the Steelers. Feels like just him and Russell Wilson will get along so well.
I do not want to for a second come across like I'm trashing a huge moment in someone's life because that's not what I'm doing. But John Rice Plumlee in the video of him finding out he was going to the Steelers was acting like he'd just been picked number 1. And I actually kind of love that. Anything. Like I love that level of enthusiasm. He was hyped up.
Yeah. So yeah, that quarterback room is very interesting. It's I'm sure there's another one, but it's Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and John Rice Plumlee. I'm sure there's probably a 4th. I don't think John Rice Plumlee is QB3, but I don't know.
Former Chicago Bear, Justin Fields, go Bears.
Yeah, and then Sean Peterson Jr. to the Bucks.
Forgot he was around.
Yeah, so I'll be seeing him at Bucks rookie minicamp in about a week. So yeah, congrats to all of those guys. Obviously, congrats to. It's always just I don't know. It's fun. Like the draft is so long, and like it's great that UCF had players drafted this year, and then the undrafted free agent. Like I just wait for the graphics to pop up because it's just fun to see where guys end up. Yeah, and the last piece of news here is that 3-star South Sumter linebacker Malachi Boone, another Boone, committed to UCF. That happened on Wednesday today, I believe. There were a lot of Boons.
Two Boons.
3 Boons.
2 Boons and 3 Booms. It's like a tongue twister.
That's a lot to say. But yeah, always good to get linebackers in the room.
Oh yeah, we still love it.
We will now move on to game of the week, UCF baseball. They're 27-15 overall, 9-12 in the Big 12. They're at Houston this weekend for a big series. Houston's 22-22. They're 6-15 in the Big 12. They play Friday at 7:30, Saturday at 7:30, and Sunday at 2. UCF has some work to do. Things haven't been going so well lately after they were at one point projected as maybe a regional host, and then things have kind of gone south a little bit. They're 5-7 over the last 3 weeks. But they're still like they're just outside the bubble. And I was reading Baseball America's like bubble watch earlier today, and basically these next 3 weekends are huge because they have a good resume and like their RPI is good, but they have series wins over Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech, all really good. But they're currently tied for ninth in the Big 12, and only 10 teams make it to the Big 12 tournament in Arlington.
Shocking thing for me to learn today. Not happy about that.
Yeah. So they're tied for ninth, and so this is obviously a big series against Houston, who is on the lower end of things at 6-12.
Yep.
6-15 in the conference.
I just said when I had no recollection of what you said, but that's fine.
You got to take care of business against Houston. Then they have Texas at home next week, and then that team they're tied for ninth with is Baylor, and they play at Baylor in the final weekend of the regular season. So
I think they're going to a regional. I do.
I hope.
I just do. I could be wrong. I don't know. I just feel good about it. I have nothing to base this off of at all, except just blind faith, which is
I don't know. Even like as kind of rough as the like previous 2 weekends were, going into this past weekend, I was like, if they just win the series against Cincinnati, like I think they'll be fine. And they lost the series to Cincinnati, and now I'm a little nervous.
They have the opportunity. It's still in their control. So I'm hopeful they get it done.
I believe I forget the guy's name. Baseball America writer had said that if they can get to 14 Big 12 wins, they might be in good shape. But they'd be in better shape if they just won 15 Big 12 games. Like that seemed to be the number. As I was reading the other teams, basically it was like a race to 15 for who will win 15 Big 12 games, and I guess that would be a huge help combined with RPI and all that stuff.
Well, Houston's already won the race to 15 losses. So
yeah.
Hopefully,
that's where it's hard because baseball is a difficult sport to just always win. But like, if they could sweep the series, it would just help so much.
Just be huge. We just got a boom.
Did we?
Yep.
Win 2 out of 3. My phone's on Do Not Disturb. So
it better be the guy that I pre-wrote a tweet for, because I'm going to be really annoyed if it's not, and then I have to do research.
It's always fun when we get booms on the podcast because both of us kind of go silent and are trying to figure out.
I'm checking the guy's Twitter to see if it was him.
Okay. Because I don't even know who this could be.
He hasn't tweeted. Okay. This is so great because now we can't end the podcast.
Yeah, no, we can't.
Until we know who it is.
Stephen Leonard.
Should I just do tweet of the week? Stephen Leonard just tweeted dog with crying.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm waiting.
Oh, it's Sheldon Arnold. It's Sheldon Arnold. I did not think UCF was getting him.
The corner, right? Is it East Tennessee State?
Yes. Wow. 87 tackles. That is a huge. Okay, guys, great news. You get to watch me tweet in real time.
This is exhilarating. I think it's been a while since I've done the Harry Potter meme, so I'll go ahead and do that while we're at it.
Just tweet it 4 times. This is terrible podcasting. I apologize. I'm just kidding.
No, it's great. Everybody loves this. Everybody's a big fan of what we're doing right now. That's big. I mean, it's funny because like we talked about Fegans being like a big or like a good depth move. I just feel like this is an even better depth move.
This is a starter. I think this might be a starter.
I can't ever proclaim anybody to be a starter ever again.
That was actually really stupid, and I shouldn't have said that.
DeCorian Patterson thinking like, oh, that's cornerback 1 right there when he committed, and then he didn't. He played a bit, but he wasn't the quarterback 1 that I thought he'd be. But no, that's good. What else? Like, it's just offensive line, isn't it? I'm like, what else do they need to do? And it's just offensive line, offensive tackle, maybe.
I posted my tweet. I'm gonna let you know right now, not a good tweet because I was trying to also podcast while doing it. But anyway, yeah, no, it's great news, guys. UCF has built a team that can win the Big 12 and go to the playoff, except maybe for tackle.
I thought he was a corner.
No, is he a safety or a corner? I thought he was a safety.
Hayes Fawcett tweeted him as a safety, so I guess
I thought he was a safety, but I'm not 100% sure.
FCS All-American, 87 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 4 picks, 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, and 2 defensive touchdowns last year.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's good.
It's okay.
Feeling good.
Feeling great.
I just would love if there was an offensive tackle out there who just decided that they wanted to hop in the portal.
That would be cool.
And end up at UCF. That'd be great. A good offensive tackle. I should have clarified. If you're a bad offensive tackle and you heard that, stay put.
At this point, I'll settle for a bad offensive tackle. Why not?
Well, I mean, wouldn't presumably if they're that desperate of a need for a bad one, don't they already have a bad one?
Well, they can have 2 bad ones, and iron sharpens iron. What's the opposite of iron sharpens iron?
I don't know. I was gonna try to make a guess there. It was probably gonna sound weird, so I'm not gonna say it.
Bronze sharpens bronze. I don't know. But
Oh yeah, tweet of the week.
tweet of the week. I was waiting for you to throw to me. I'm like, I feel like
Yeah,
you
no,
might have
I was.
forgotten tweet of the week.
I did. I was gonna because you originally at one point you had said, "Should I just do tweet of the week while we're waiting to find out who it was?" So for some reason in my brain, I thought you'd already done it, and I was about to wrap up the podcast. So tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Yeah, thanks. So if you haven't
You're
been on
welcome.
social media, I'm sorry. This is so unprofessional. I'm sitting here and I'm reading my own tweet and I'm annoyed at how bad it is because I just quickly wrote it and posted it while we were doing the podcast.
Okay,
But
I'll read it.
don't read it. But anyway, so if you haven't been on social media a ton lately, The Athletic wrote this really in-depth, really well-reported story where they talked with a bunch of the. So when Deion Sanders took over at Colorado last year, he kicked 53 players off the team after spring practice, which I'm not going to vilify him for a ton because while bad, it's becoming more of the norm. But this was the first time those players had really been given a voice by anybody. And the Athletic piece was very balanced, very fair. It really didn't take a stance on whether this is right or wrong. It more just gave those players the microphone to talk about their experiences. And a lot of them still spoke, not they weren't like, oh, I hate Deion Sanders or anything like that. They just talked about how crazy it was, how it felt like some of the quotes are really compelling, how they felt like they were on a reality TV show. A lot of them felt like it was just clear from right away that Deion brought in the guys who were his guys and he had no time for the rest of them. Most of them never even spoke to him. He was a little disrespectful. He referred to them as furniture and things like that. I don't know. But anyway, it's become a whole Twitter thing because Colorado fans just basically took this as an act of war. And they hate The Athletic and they're a terrible, corrupt publication. And that's one thing when fans do that. Then the Sanders family got in on it. And Deion Sanders has tweeted some ridiculous stuff and his kids have tweeted some crazy stuff. So Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback, wins tweet of the week because he had a phrase that he posted in a tweet that I'm now going to incorporate in my everyday life because I love it. And he quote tweeted an Athletic post with a specific quote from Xavier Smith, who was a player who hit the portal and left Colorado, and about how he felt disrespected because Deion wouldn't even look him in the eye when he was telling him he was off the team. And Shedeur Sanders quote tweeted that and said, I don't even remember him, to be honest. Bro had to be very mid at best. And let me just say that very mid at best is a trailblazing sentence that is going
one of the worst things you can be, I think.
Very mid at best. And listen, it's one thing. It's kind of crazy that an actual starting quarterback who's probably going to get drafted is doing that. Deion Sanders has been tweeting stuff like that too. And I know that he's a character. I know that's his thing, but it is weird to see an actual Power 5 head coach going after kids he cut on Twitter. It's been weird. And I know that like we've long established that if you are a fan of a sports team, your said sports team can essentially do anything and you will find a way to justify it. But seeing Colorado fans just rabidly in favor of all of this has been a little crazy.
Unless they start winning, it's going to get old.
Very quickly, as in like 2 games into the season. You cannot act like this and then go 4-8 again. And they're kind of a train wreck right now. They've lost a lot of guys to the portal. I'm curious how the season's going to go for them.
Yeah. I just really, it would almost, I'm not going to say it'd be rock bottom, but it would be really, really bad if UCF lost that game.
But if UCF's one of their only wins, right? They're like a 4-8 team.
I'd be, yeah,
UCF,
like that's
awful.
I thought about that the other day because I was like, wow, they're a mess right now. I was like, they're just like, there's no way they lose that game, right? I'm like, well, they could. Like,
they're in such a unique position though that they've set up for themselves because it's the rare game where the bounce house is going to be rocking. Fans are so excited for that game. It's going to be this electric environment, and it's for an opponent that isn't good. Like that's actually a wild situation.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen the ticket prices, right? The resale prices and stuff is insane.
Are you worried about Are you worried about the atmosphere being bad for that game because a lot of the more diehard fans are going to take advantage of those resale prices, and we're just going to get a lot of casuals who just want to see Deion? I think it's possible, and I wouldn't blame anyone who sold their ticket. It's crazy.
But that's what's kind of surprising to me is like people are spending that much money to come see a guy coach.
It's Deion Sanders, man.
I know, but it's like he's going to be on the sideline standing there.
It's Deion Sanders, man.
Like I don't know. I guess I'm probably off. People are going to tell me I'm way wrong, but like it's the thing. It's like I wasn't thinking like, yeah, all of a sudden a bunch of Colorado fans are going to show up at the bounce house. Like I would be surprised if it was like what we saw with West Virginia last year. I don't think it's that.
I think you're just going to get a lot of people who live in Orlando who are like, oh, Deion Sanders, like who maybe aren't like the biggest UCF fans in the world, but want to be in the stadium. And you got a lot of UCF fans who have season tickets who are like, I can like make back the price of my season ticket package if I sell this ticket. Let's do it.
If you're one of those people, issues.
I don't blame you. I don't. Oh, which people? No, I don't blame the people.
The people who are sitting in Orlando right now, like I gotta pay $450 to go watch Deion Sanders coach a team that might win 4 or 5 games this year at best. That might be very mid at best. Like if you're
And
one
we
of
come
those
full
people,
circle.
if you're one of those people, like I
God.
don't know. Just find a better use for that money. So let's
Charity.
donate to UCF. Donate.
Oh,
No, I was gonna say
oh.
donate it to UCF. Charity, same thing. I guess. I don't know.
UCF football just tweeted, "We warned y'all." Did they? Oh, wait, they quote tweeted the warning. Yeah, no, they did. They did warn us.
Well, all the coaches kept like tweeting like we aren't done yet, and then
Well,
Erica
no, they
Salvo.
posted it was the Sandhill Crane horror video they published this morning. Did you watch that?
Oh, I didn't watch the full video.
You need to. It was
Okay,
it was scary. I
It
think
was
I'm afraid of
scary.
Sandhill Cranes now.
I've always not enjoyed those things, but
They've got very harsh faces.
just the noises they make, because they used to live they probably still do, like near the house that I lived in Orlando, and it was just like because there's a lake back there, and just hear them like all the time. And it
Those
was
like
just so annoying.
deep bellowing noises they make. It's a
Deep
very
bellowing
strange noise.
squawks they do, or just
Especially when other
squawk.
birds just chirp and they do that.
Yeah,
Like it's very
and they do the
jarring.
little, I was about to do the noise, and it would have been really bad for the podcast.
Try it. Wait.
No, I don't want
Wait,
to.
wait,
No,
wait.
it was
No.
going to be a bad. Not saying bad, like people probably would have laughed at it, but it would have been a bad thing of me to be out there, just because it would have been sounded terrible.
I have the button that ends the recording of the podcast, and I'm not sure that I can press it until you've attempted to make the Sandhill Crane.
That's okay. I'll just leave, and then I'm just going to leave you there. I don't know what happens then, but
Man,
we could find out if that's what you're going to do. If we're going to play that game, we can.
I'll let it go till next time. We should do like some sort of stretch goal, like if we get X amount of subscribers on YouTube or something, we'll do the Sandhill Crane noise.
I don't even know how I was going to try to attempt it either. Like that was going to be so bad.
I don't know how I'd even go about it. I really don't.
I don't know. We won't find out today. Maybe ever. But yeah, cool. Thank you guys so much for listening. Be back next week with episode 205. Yeah, until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.